African Union Commission, as well as the World Economic Forum Global Agenda Council on Africa. My name is Mono Mupotola. I am the Director of Regional Integration at the African Development Bank. I'd like to welcome you all to this special session. Can we please, we're trying to start the event. Thank you. As I was saying, my name is Mono Mupotola. I'm the Director of Regional Integration at the African Development Bank, and I'd like to welcome you all to the launch of the third edition of the Visa Openness Index. The African Development Bank, together with the African Union Commission and the World Economic Forum Global Agenda Council on Africa, published this third edition on the 28th of November this year. This edition reveals that African countries are more open to each other and are introducing visa-free or visa-on-arrival benefits for Africans traveling across the continent. This is a good result because it facilitates the freer movement of people in our collective vision, and it lies at the heart of the AUC, Africa Union's Agenda 2063. The African Development Bank continues to support efforts towards the visa openness as part of our Integrate Africa agenda. As you know, it's one of the 5 focus areas of the bank. Let me just say that the Visa Openness Index assesses the progress of African countries' achievement on relaxing their visa regime. It takes into account the visa requirements set up by each member state of the African Union when citizens of other member states cross their borders. It aims to inform policymakers and African leaders to build on the benefits of greater visa openness for countries, region, and for the continent. This annual exercise allows us to trace the changes in the scores over time and improvements made to support freer movement of people on the continent. In this edition, about 37 countries improved or maintained their scores, and 11 countries offer liberal access to all Africans, and 16 countries offer e-visas. A quick synopsis of the regions indicate that East Africa has performed well on visa openness, with 8 countries in the top 20. Next is West Africa, whose 7 countries are ranked in the top 20. Seychelles and Benin offer visa-free access to all Africans and ranked the top. Benin is the highest performing country since the last edition of the index, as it increased its score by 200% and joined at the top of the ranking, up from 27th position last year. The country started to offer visa-free access to all African countries and is the first Francophone country to do so. This development will no doubt contribute to accelerate the government's tourism action plan. Current contribution of travel and tourism sector to Benin's total GDP is estimated at 5.7%, and this is expected to rise further by 3.8% in 2018. I'd like to take note of 2 important initiatives that took place in 2018. The launch of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the signing of the Single African Air Transport Market, which created an environment that promotes air connectivity in Africa. Great progress has been made on the Free Movement of Persons Protocol, which paves the way for countries to take steps to allowing Africans rights of residence and establishment on the continent. Taking all these developments into account, the 2018 was a landmark chapter in Africa's integration efforts. Let me also say that there's been poor progress on the digital front. More countries are now issuing e-visas. And as part of our ongoing information exercise, we have built a platform which is www.visaopenness.org, which aims to promote greater research, advocacy, and policy dialogue on visa openness solutions across the continent. Let me also say in closing that would like to congratulate those countries that have improved on their visa openness rankings and contributed to bringing down the walls that separate us. I would also like to call for further collaboration and action towards seamless borders and free movement for the people of Africa. Thank you very much. Let me at this point ask my colleague, Jean-Guy Africa, to just give us a few highlights from this year's visa openness report. Jean-Guy.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to dim the lights. You can see both presentations on the far right and far left. My name is Jean-Guy Africa. I'm a policy specialist at the African Development Bank in the Trade and Investment Climate Division. And it is an honor for me today to speak to you on a topic that I hold close to heart. Visa openness and visa policies in general and free movement of people in Africa. My presentation is divided as follows, 3 sections. In the first section, I'll just highlight why visa openness matters. I'll also anchor the presentation on some key instruments and protocols that guide this whole idea of getting Africans to move freely within Africa. And I'll give some more details on some of the key findings of the latest edition of the index, and I'll propose some solutions and way forward. Now, there's a host of, a long list of instruments that actually touch on the issue of free movement of people in Africa. But I just wanted to choose 3 that are particularly relevant for the times we are in. The first one is the migration policy framework, the one passed in Gambia in 2006. The second one is, of course, Agenda 2063. And the most recent one is the Free Movement of Persons Protocol. All of them, in a way, propose for a phased approach to free movement of persons. And it starts with 3 key rights. You can see them at the bottom of the slide. The rights of entry, and this is visas, just basically making it easier for Africans to obtain visa within Africa. The rights of residence, allowing Africans to conduct economic activities throughout Africa. Finally, the right of establishment, allowing Africans, in addition to conducting economic activities, to establish in other African countries. So all these frameworks touch on those aspects. And in addition to that, there are regional protocols that state or aim for similar claims. So I wanted to make it clear that in terms of the regulation, it's already anchored. Now, I like to show some few slides whenever I present on visas. The first one is a quote from Dr. Michael Clements from the Center for Global Development, and it reads, "Remove all the barriers to trade goods, the obstacles to capital flows, and it still would not compensate for the inefficiencies created by global mobility restrictions. Gains from loosening restrictions probably run in the tens of billions of dollars. It applies for global restrictions as well as regional restrictions." Second is a story that I also like to tell. In 2016, when we were doing the second edition of the index, we decided to do a documentary, a film on visa openness. And we chose 2 countries, 2 case studies, Rwanda and Mauritius. So in addition to seeing businessmen, we also wanted to feel how visa impacted students. So we were intrigued by the case of a Nigerian that we met at the University of Kigali in Rwanda. His name is Stanley Okeye. Now, the University of Kigali is a 5-year-old university, and we had a Nigerian student studying here halfway across the continent, so we were very curious how he got here. And he told us that he was interested and intrigued by the work that the government of Rwanda was doing in IT. He went on the website, realized that he could get a visa on arrival. He called friends and families in the region, saved up some bit of money, and visited Rwanda. He liked what he saw. Fast forward 1 year, Stanley is studying at the University of Kigali. It's the same story for Lionel, a Kenyan studying at the University of Mauritius. Stanley and Lionel represent a microcosm of the hundreds of millions of Africans that yearn to be able to move, to learn, to trade, to seek medical treatment, and so on, as well as SMEs. So the benefits extend in terms of youth mobility and allowing them to capitalize on the wide array of opportunities throughout the continent. It means there are impacts in terms of tourism and investments. And it also happens to be one of Africa's lowest hanging fruits. It doesn't require a lot of investments, just a political decision. So now, on the index, the African Development Bank has a history of designing indices with the African Union. So the first one we did was the Africa Regional Integration Index, a very complex index. 5 dimensions: social integration, infrastructure, trade integration. We started with a list of 80 indicators. We narrowed down to 20. By the time we were done designing the index, after a grueling process of 4 years, the only people excited around the table were scholars and academics. Policymakers couldn't make sense of it. So in designing the Visa Openness Index with the AU, we decided to retain the element of simplicity at the heart of the index. This index has 3 indicators and 3 indicators only so far. Does the country require visa at departure? Does it allow visa on arrival, or no visas like like Seychelles and Benin? So we use those 3 indicators, established a weighting system of 0 to 1, with 1 being the highest in terms of visa openness, 0 being the lowest. We gave 1 for no visas. We gave 0.8 in terms of weight to visa on arrival, and 0 for visa at departure, which is the most difficult one. Basically, before you board the plane, you have to obtain a visa from an honorary consulate or an embassy. We've all experienced what it feels like when you have to get a visa at departure before you board a plane. Some of the results, whenever I give these ideas, think of your country. Africans do not need a visa to travel to only 25% African countries. So if I'm Rwandan today, I need a visa to travel to only, now Africans do not need a visa to travel to only 25% of other African countries. Africans can get visas on arrival in only 25% other African countries, and Africans need visas to travel to 51% of other African countries. So irrespective of nationality, on average, regardless of your nationality, you would need a visa at departure before you board the plane to travel half the continent. We've improved. We've gone from 20 to 25% in terms of not needing a visa to travel, no visa. In terms of getting visa on arrival, we stagnated a bit. We're still standing around 24%. And in terms of needing a visa to travel to other African countries, we've gone from 55% to 51%. We've improved, but there's a very long way to go if we are to realize the aims of our forefathers, the protocols and instruments, because that number essentially should come down to 0. Some additional key findings to stimulate the debate. Of the top 20 countries that are most visa open, 8 are in East Africa, 7 are in West Africa, 4 are in Southern Africa, 1 is in North Africa, and none are in Central Africa. 11 countries offer visa liberal access. When I say liberal visa access, it means either visa on arrival or no visas, up from 10. And as a group, upper middle income countries tend to be less open than lower income countries. And small landlocked and island states tend to also be more open. Now, I also wanted to bring in a dose of pragmatism in this presentation. It's just a visa. It's not a silver bullet. The case study of Mauritius and Rwanda and all the countries that have succeeded in driving trade, investment, and tourism highlighted the fact that in addition to visas, there were also massive investments in transport infrastructure and tourism infrastructure and in business reform. So visas help, but it must be accompanied by a host of measures for it to derive the benefits that we are all looking for. Some solutions that we promote, African Development Bank and AU, is positive reciprocity. The level of negative reciprocity that happens on the continent is quite amazing. A lot of countries offer visa on arrival, and there's no reciprocity, or at least very low. Seek to create some mentorship programs to alleviate some of the fears associated with visa openness, such as security concerns. Perhaps next year, should resources allow, we could look into elements such as cost of visas, time to obtain visas, and so on. You can obtain more information on the website. For that, please go to www.
Discussion on to come to the podium. Let me start with the Honorable Minister of Trade and Industry of the Republic of Rwanda, Mrs. Soraya Hakuzi Nyaremye. Executive Chairman, African Center for Shared Development Capacity Building. Since yesterday, regarding the launch of the CFTA, so far only 12 countries have signed up. We need 22 countries for the CFTA to actually kick into effect. And Rwanda was one of the first countries that signed up for the CFTA. So I'd like to start by asking the Honorable Minister of Trade and Industry on why Rwanda was amongst the leaders in signing and ratifying the CFTA. What are the advantages that Rwanda saw in this agreement, and what are lessons that other countries can learn on how you went about signing and ratifying the CFTA?
Thank you very much. First of all, I think for Rwanda, it's always been imperative to champion regional integration and African integration. And it's no coincidence that when our president is the chairman of the African Union this year, that he really pushed hard and advocated to have the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement signed in March. We were among the first countries to sign, and Rwanda, when the AfCFTA was signed in March, 42 countries, as you know, of the African Union signed right away, which in itself was important for our country to only be 12 million. So having that in mind and setting the stage for not only being part of a larger bloc, but also not only advocating for a common market. We know the road ahead is long. As you know, only 12 countries now have ratified the agreement, but still we are hopeful that for the deadline that's set for next year to have it implemented, we'll get to do 22 ratifications. And as Rwanda's chair of the African Union, we continue to advocate and mobilize our peers so that the agreement is implemented as soon as possible. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Minister. Let me just follow up with Professor Olu. on what the minister has said, that they really were, when Rwanda was looking at, was signing up and ratifying the AfCFTA, they looked at the market size and some of the advantages that came with signing up to the CFTA. What else? I'd like for you to give us just an outline of what you see as some of the challenges that some countries may feel or may be concerned with in terms of signing up to the CFTA. And how can these be addressed?
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Like we said in the morning session, these initiatives have benefits, but they also have